Hello, and welcome to Sleeping Therapy by Emma. I'm Emma, and I'm so glad you've chosen to join me tonight for a journey into tranquility and rest. In our busy lives, finding true peace can sometimes feel like an impossible quest. But here, in this space, we create a sanctuary for your mind and spirit. My goal is to guide you gently away from the day's worries and into a deep, restorative sleep, using the power of calming narratives and soothing imagery. Tonight, we embark on an extraordinary adventure through time to a city that has whispered stories for millennia, a city of ancient echoes, of timeless beauty, and of profound peace, once you learn to listen to its quiet rhythms. As you settle into your most comfortable position, allow your body to relax, your breath to deepen, and your mind to open to the gentle flow of my voice. Let each word be a soft wave, carrying you further and further into a state of serene relaxation. Before we begin our journey, if you find solace and peace in these stories, please consider subscribing to Sleeping Therapy by Emma for more calming narratives and guided sleep experiences. Your support helps me continue to create this peaceful haven for you. Now, close your eyes, take a deep, calming breath, and let us drift into the heart of the eternal city, Rome. The whispers of the eternal city. What is a city? Is it merely the cold, hard stones, worn smooth by the countless sandals of emperors, the hurried footsteps of merchants, and the slow, deliberate pace of pilgrims? Is it the silent marble statues, their sightless eyes having witnessed the birth and death of entire worlds, the rise and fall of dynasties, the ebb and flow of human ambition? Is it the formidable ancient walls, built with immense effort and sacrifice to keep enemies out, yet now standing as welcoming monuments, inviting millions from every corner of the globe to enter and explore? Or, as we delve deeper into the essence of what makes a place truly eternal, is a city something far more profound? Is it a living, breathing story, woven from the threads of countless lives and events? Is it a collective memory, passed down through generations, shaping the very air that circulates within its boundaries? Is it a living, breathing soul, whispering its ancient secrets on the gentle wind that rustles through the dark cypress trees, a breeze that has carried tales through centuries, born on the muddy, patient waters of the Tiber River? Tonight we journey to such a city that was once, quite literally, the world. A city that has served as the vibrant heart of an immense empire, stretching its influence across continents. It has been the solemn tomb of the faith, only to see that faith rise again, transformed and more powerful. It has been the fertile cradle of a new age, where art, philosophy, and governance were reimagined. Above all, it stands as an enduring testament to the indomitable power of the human spirit, its capacity for both creation and destruction, for both soaring triumph and heartbreaking tragedy. It is a city of savage contradictions, a place where sacred beauty coexists with savage spectacle, where sublime art is born from brutal politics, where profound spirituality is intertwined with earthly desires. It is a city born from a myth, forged in the crucible of conquest, bathed in the purifying waters of faith, and reborn time and again in the transformative fires of human genius. This, my dear listeners, is the story of Rome, the eternal city. And as we begin to explore its depths, allow your mind to drift, to imagine, to feel the ancient presence that still lingers in its very air. Let the sounds of your day fade, replaced by the gentle hum of history, the soft murmur of a city that has seen it all. Our story, like Rome itself, begins not with a dry historical fact, but with a legend. A legend so powerful, so primal, so deeply ingrained in the collective consciousness of the Western world, that it has echoed for nearly 3,000 years, shaping perceptions and inspiring generations. It begins with the gentle flow of a river, the fierce devotion of a she-wolf, and the miraculous survival of two twin boys, cast out to die, yet destined for an unimaginable future. Imagine, if you will, the banks of the Tiber River long before the first grand stone of the Colosseum was ever laid. Before the Forum was anything more than a marshy valley, before the grand aqueducts spanned the landscape, the land around was a wild, untamed tapestry of dense forest and treacherous marshland, a primeval landscape broken only by 7 low, distinct volcanic hills. These hills, each with its own character and story, would one day become the very foundation of a global power: the Palatine, the Capitoline, the Aventine, the Cillian, the Esquiline, the Viminal, and the Quirinal. It is here, amidst this raw, untamed beauty, that the storytellers of old would say, a humble basket washed ashore. And within that basket, nestled against the reeds, were Romulus and Remus, the infant sons of a Vestal virgin, Rhea Silvia, and, as the whispers carried on the wind would suggest, the divine offspring of the god of war himself, Mars. Abandoned by a jealous king, their great-uncle Amulius, who feared a prophecy of his own demise, these innocent babes were destined for a watery grave, a tragic end to a nascent life. But fate, that mysterious weaver of destinies, or perhaps the direct intervention of the gods themselves, had other, grander plans. They were found not by a human hand, but by a creature of the wild, a she-wolf, the lupa, who, in a moment of profound, almost divine intervention, saw not a meal, not prey, but children in need. And so she suckled them as her own, offering them the life-giving milk of a predator within the protective confines of a cave at the foot of the Palatine Hill. Can you picture it? The wild beast, her instincts overridden by a higher purpose, nurturing the very beings who would one day build an empire. It is an unforgettable image, isn't it? 2 vulnerable human infants, drawing sustenance and strength from a wild beast. This powerful scene is not just a charming tale. It is the foundational myth of Rome. And it tells us everything we need to know about how the Romans came to see themselves. They were fierce, resilient, divinely favored, and, most importantly, raised on the raw, untamed milk of a predator. They were outsiders, forged in the wilderness, nourished by the wild, and destined for a greatness that would reshape the world. This myth instilled in them a sense of destiny, a belief in their own unique strength, and a connection to the primal forces of nature. Archaeology, of course, tells a quieter, more humble story, one built on the painstaking excavation of earth and the careful interpretation of ancient remains. On the Palatine Hill, the most naturally defensible of the seven, we find the faint, almost ethereal traces of early settlements. Post holes in the earth, remnants of simple, circular huts made of wattle and daub, dating back as far as the 10th century BCE. These were not the grand homes of demigods, but the humble dwellings of shepherds and farmers, Italic people who spoke an early form of Latin. They sought the high ground for practical reasons, protection from rival tribes who roamed the nascent landscape, and to escape the malaria-ridden swamps that festered in the valleys below, breeding disease and discomfort. For centuries, this was the stark reality of life in this region, a collection of small, scattered, independent villages, each crowning its own hill, separated by marshy, inhospitable terrain. They were not yet a unified city. They were not yet Rome. They were merely the seeds from which a colossal oak would one day grow. For that transformation to happen, for these disparate settlements to coalesce into something greater, they needed a spark, a catalyst. And that spark, that transformative influence, came from the north, from a civilization that was everything these early Latins were not: sophisticated, organized, and technologically advanced. As you listen, let your breath become slow and even, allowing the imagery to paint itself in your mind, guiding you deeper into relaxation. Imagine the quiet, unassuming lives of those early settlers, unaware of the grand destiny that awaited their humble hills. The Etruscan dawn and the birth of the Republic before Rome, as we know it, truly became Rome. There existed another, far more sophisticated and enigmatic power in the heart of Italy, the Etruscans. They were a mysterious and vibrant people who held sway over the region we now call Tuscany, their influence stretching far and wide. Their language, though written in alphabet derived from the Greeks, remains largely undeciphered in its origins, adding to their mystique. Yet, what we do know of them paints a picture of remarkable advancement in cultural richness. They were master metalworkers. Their exquisite bronze statues and intricate gold jewelry, highly coveted and traded across the entire Mediterranean world. They were skilled engineers, capable of building meticulously planned cities with paved streets and solid stone foundations, at a time when the future Romans still resided in simple circular huts. And they were, by all accounts, a joyful, life-affirming people whose vibrant tomb paintings depict lavish banquets, spirited dancing, and enchanting music, a stark contrast to the more austere Roman sensibilities that would later emerge. For a significant period, their influence expanded southward, across the winding Tiber, and they came to rule over the burgeoning, scattered settlements of the Seven Hills. Under the guiding hand of Etruscan influence, the disparate, isolated villages began a slow, yet inevitable process of merging, of coalescing into something greater than the sum of their parts. The most crucial and transformative development during this period took place in the marshy valley nestled between the Palatine and Capitoline hills. This low-lying ground, once a somber burial site, was systematically drained. The Etruscan kings, most notably the legendary Tarquins, commissioned a monumental feat of engineering that stands as a testament to their ingenuity: a great covered sewer, a marvel of ancient technology known as the Cloaca Maxima. This impressive structure channeled the stagnant swamp water directly into the Tiber, effectively reclaiming the land and creating a dry, central, and usable space. Remarkably, this ancient sewer, a silent witness to millennia of history, still functions today, a hidden artery pulsing beneath the modern city of Rome, a constant reminder of its Etruscan origins. And in that newly drained valley, a space was meticulously cleared. It wasn't grand or imposing at first. It was simply an open area. But this humble clearing would soon become the single most important space in all of Roman history. It was the Forum, the beating heart of the nascent city. It served as a bustling marketplace where goods were exchanged, a vital meeting place where citizens gathered, and, crucially, a political stage where the destiny of Rome would be debated and decided. The scattered villages, once isolated, now had a common center, a focal point around which their collective identity could begin to form. They were at last truly becoming a city. It was the Etruscans who bestowed upon Rome its very name, likely derived from an Etruscan clan name, Rumla. They imparted to the Romans their engineering prowess, evident in the construction techniques and infrastructure that would define the city. They influenced its architectural forms, laying the groundwork for the grand structures that would later dominate the Roman landscape. And they introduced many of its religious rituals, such as the intricate and often unsettling practice of reading omens and the entrails of sacrificed animals, a practice that would persist for centuries. Moreover, they gave Rome its first kings. For over a century, Rome was governed by a line of 7 kings, a fascinating mix of native Romans and powerful Etruscan rulers. These early monarchs oversaw the construction of Rome's first temples, including the magnificent temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, perched majestically on the Capitoline Hill. They also initiated the building of the first defensive walls, famously known as the Servian Wall, which encircled the 7 hills, and formally delineated the city's boundaries, giving it a defined physical presence. And perhaps most significantly, they established the first Senate, an advisory council composed of elders, known as the Paters or Fathers, from whom the powerful patrician class would later descend. This early Senate, though advisory, laid the groundwork for the complex political system that would define the Republic. But the Romans, those fiercely independent people who saw themselves as the sons of the she-wolf, were not destined to be ruled by kings forever. Their own legends, passed down through generations, speak of a growing resentment, a deep-seated chafing under the yoke of foreign rulers, particularly the last of the Etruscan kings. The final, terrible act of tyranny, as vividly told by the Roman historian Livy, sealed the monarchy's fate and ignited the flames of rebellion. The son of the last king, Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud, committed a heinous and unforgivable crime. He raped Lucretia, the virtuous and honorable wife of a Roman nobleman, Unable to live with the profound dishonor and shame, Lucretia, with a strength born of despair, summoned her father and husband made them swear a solemn oath of vengeance against the tyrannical monarchy, and then in a heartbreaking act of defiance plunged a dagger into her own heart. Her tragic death, a symbol of purity violated by tyranny, became the catalyst. Her sacrifice ignited a firestorm of rebellion that swept through Rome, led by a man named Lucius Junius Brutus, an ancestor of the Brutus who would millennia later play a pivotal role in the assassination of Caesar. The enraged Roman nobility rose up with a unified purpose. They drove Tarquinius and his entire family from the city, banishing the very concept of kingship from Rome. Standing before Lucretia's lifeless body, a poignant reminder of the cost of tyranny, they swore a sacred oath. Never again would a king rule in Rome. The very word king would become anathema, a symbol of oppression and absolute power to be forever avoided. In that pivotal moment, in the year 509 BCE, something entirely new was born, something that would fundamentally change the course of history, not just for Rome, but for the entire Western world. They called it res publica. The public thing, the republic. It was a system of governance built not on the arbitrary whims of a single, all-powerful ruler, but on the foundational principles of law, shared governance, and a deep-seated, almost pathological fear of absolute power. The age of kings was decisively over. The age of the Republic had begun, and the small city on the Tiber, now free from the shackles of monarchy, was about to set out on an ambitious path of conquest and expansion that would eventually lead it to the very ends of the known world, transforming it from a regional power into a global empire. As you listen to the echoes of this ancient revolution, feel the sense of freedom and determination that swept through the early Romans, and let that feeling of liberation gently lull you into a deeper state of calm. The early republic was a state forged in the crucible of perpetual conflict. It was a tough agrarian society where the ideal citizen was not a philosopher or a merchant, but a farmer-soldier, a man deeply rooted in the land, yet always ready to defend his home and his state. A perfect embodiment of this ideal was a man like Cincinnatus. The story of Cincinnatus, a moral lesson as much as a historical account, tells how he was diligently working at his plow, tilling his modest farm when messengers from the Senate arrived. The state was in mortal danger, its army trapped and surrounded by an enemy tribe, facing imminent annihilation. He was being appointed dictator, a temporary position of absolute authority granted only in times of extreme emergency. Cincinnatus, without hesitation, wiped the sweat from his brow, accepted the solemn duty, led the Roman forces, defeated the enemy in a mere 16 days, and then, having saved the state from certain destruction, immediately relinquished all power and humbly returned to his farm. This was the cherished ideal: duty over personal ambition, the welfare of the state over the self. This unwavering commitment to civic virtue was the bedrock of the early republic, a quality that allowed it to endure and expand. For 2 long centuries, Rome fought war after war against its numerous neighbors, The Latins, the Samnites, the Etruscans, and the formidable Gauls from the north. It was a brutal, grinding struggle for survival, a constant battle for dominance on the Italian peninsula. In 390 BCE, the city faced an existential threat when a band of Gauls, fierce warriors from beyond the Alps, sacked Rome and burned much of it to the ground, leaving behind a trail of devastation. This humiliation, this profound scar on the city's psyche, would be seared into the Roman memory for centuries, a constant reminder of their vulnerability. But true to their resilient nature, they rebuilt, they fought back. They learned from their defeats, growing stronger with each challenge. With each hard-won victory, Rome didn't merely conquer its adversaries. It absorbed them. This was the true genius of Roman expansion, a strategy that set them apart from other ancient empires. Instead of simply subjugating and exploiting, Rome granted varying degrees of citizenship or ally status to the defeated peoples, binding them to Rome with carefully crafted treaties, an ever-expanding network of roads that facilitated trade and communication, and a shared interest in future conquests. The famous Roman legions, the formidable engine of this relentless expansion, were not just filled with men from the city itself, but drew their strength from all over Italy, incorporating the very peoples they had once fought against. This unique and inclusive approach transformed former enemies into loyal partners, creating a vast, almost inexhaustible reservoir of manpower that no other state in the ancient world could possibly match. This ability to integrate and assimilate was a key factor in Rome's enduring success, allowing it to grow from a small city-state into a dominant regional power. As you hear of this relentless expansion, let the idea of growth and strength fill your mind, a comforting thought as you drift deeper into sleep. The Punic Wars, a clash of titans, by 270 BCE, Rome had solidified its position as the undisputed master of the Italian peninsula. It had grown from a mere city-state, albeit a powerful one, into a formidable territorial power, its influence radiating outwards. But as its gaze extended beyond its shores, across the shimmering expanse of the sea, it encountered a rival. A colossal power that dominated the waves, a great trading empire with its vibrant heart nestled in North Africa, a city whose immense wealth and unparalleled naval might dwarfed anything Rome had yet achieved. But formidable rival was Carthage, a Phoenician colony that had grown into a maritime superpower, controlling vast trade routes and possessing a formidable fleet. The inevitable clash between Rome and Carthage, a series of conflicts known to history as the Punic Wars, was far more than just a struggle for territory or economic dominance. It was a profound struggle for the very soul of the Mediterranean world. It was a conflict that would rage for over 100 years, an ancient world war that would push Rome to the very brink of annihilation, testing its resilience and determination to their absolute limits. It was a war of titans, a monumental struggle between two vastly different civilizations, each convinced of its own destiny. And at the very heart of this epic conflict, its central and most brilliant figure was one of the greatest military minds in all of history. Hannibal Barca, a Carthaginian general, whose name would forever be etched into the annals of warfare. In the Second Punic War, Hannibal, driven by a deep-seated hatred for Rome, conceived and executed a plan that was, by all accounts, unthinkable. He assembled a diverse army, a formidable force composed of North Africans, Iberians, and Gauls, and most strikingly, a contingent of war elephants, their massive forms a terrifying sight. With this audacious force, he embarked on an epic journey from Spain, leading his troops over the treacherous, snow-covered passes of the Alps, a feat of logistical and military genius that remains awe-inspiring to this day. He descended into Italy, appearing as if from nowhere, a specter of destruction in the very heartland of his enemy. For 15 long years, he rampaged through the Roman countryside, a constant, terrifying presence. He inflicted one catastrophic defeat after another on the Romans, who, despite their numerical superiority, were tactically outmaneuvered at every turn, their traditional methods proving ineffective against Hannibal's brilliant and unpredictable strategies. The most devastating of these defeats, a name that would become synonymous with tactical genius and utter slaughter, came at Cannae in 216 BCE. At Cannae, Hannibal, though significantly outnumbered, employed a brilliant double envelopment maneuver, a tactical masterpiece that allowed him to encircle and utterly annihilate a massive Roman army. The Roman historian Livy, whose accounts often lean towards the dramatic, claims that nearly 50,000 Roman soldiers were killed in a single day, a number that, even if exaggerated, speaks to the horrific scale of the defeat. It was the Republic's darkest hour, a moment of profound despair. The city of Rome itself was gripped by a paralyzing panic, fearing that Hannibal would march on their gates at any moment. Any other state facing such a catastrophic series of defeats would surely have collapsed. Any other people would have sued for peace, desperate to end the bloodshed and devastation. But the Romans were different. Their defining characteristic, the very essence of their spirit, was not a fleeting brilliance or a momentary burst of genius, but a stubborn, unyielding, almost superhuman resilience. They refused to surrender, even in the face of overwhelming odds. They embodied the spirit of their mythical founders, Romulus and Remus, nurtured by the wild, possessing an unbreakable will. They raised new armies, drawing upon their vast reserves of manpower. They wisely avoided open battle with Hannibal, adopting instead a grueling Fabian strategy of attrition, harassing his supply lines and wearing down his forces without engaging in decisive confrontations. And crucially, they found a general, a young and audacious military genius named Publius Cornelius Scipio, who was bold enough to take the fight directly to Carthage itself. By attacking Hannibal's home base in Africa, Scipio forced the Carthaginian general to abandon his devastating campaign in Italy and return to defend his own city, a strategic masterstroke that turned the tide of the war. And there, on the dusty plains of Zama in 202 BCE, the two greatest generals of their age finally met in a decisive confrontation. Scipio, having meticulously studied Hannibal's tactics, having learned from the very defeats his people had suffered, finally defeated him in a pitched battle. The war, after more than a century of intermittent conflict, was finally over. Rome emerged victorious, battered but unbroken. Carthage, its power shattered, its wealth depleted, was crippled beyond recovery. A generation later, in a final, brutal act of vengeance and fear, Rome would utterly destroy Carthage, razing it to the ground and, according to legend, sowing its fields with salt, ensuring that nothing would ever grow there again. This act, though harsh, marked the definitive end of Rome's greatest rival and cemented its position as the dominant power in the Mediterranean. As you reflect on this epic struggle, allow the immense scale of history to wash over you, carrying away any lingering tension, leaving only a sense of profound calm and the quiet rhythm of your breath. The spoils of victory and the seeds of decline. The victory over Carthage was more than just a military triumph. It was a watershed moment that irrevocably altered the trajectory of Rome. No longer merely an Italian power, Rome now stood as the undisputed master of the Mediterranean world, its influence stretching from the Iberian Peninsula to the shores of Asia Minor. With this newfound dominance came an unprecedented flood of wealth, a torrent that poured into the city, transforming its very fabric. Silver from the rich mines of Spain, vast quantities of grain from the fertile fields of Sicily, and North Africa, and perhaps most significantly, a ceaseless stream of enslaved people from every corner of the conquered sea, all flowed into Rome. The city, once a collection of humble brick and wood dwellings, began to undergo a dramatic metamorphosis. New temples, grand and imposing, built of gleaming stone and exquisite marble, rose majestically, financed by the immense spoils of war. The super-rich, the powerful senatorial class constructed lavish villas on the verdant hills surrounding the city, their floors adorned with intricate mosaics depicting scenes from Greek mythology, a testament to their newfound opulence and their growing fascination with Hellenistic culture. Meanwhile, the city's population swelled dramatically with landless farmers, dispossessed and displaced by the vast, slave-run agricultural estates known as latifundia, which were rapidly replacing the small, independent family farms that had once been the backbone of Roman society. This influx of wealth and people, while seemingly a sign of prosperity, began to sow the seeds of profound social and political upheaval. But this new wealth, this seemingly endless bounty, proved to be a corrosive poison, slowly but surely eroding the very foundations of the Republic. The cherished old ideal of the farmer-soldier, of a man like Cincinnatus leaving his plow to save the state and then humbly returning to his fields, was dying a slow, painful death. A vast and permanent gulf opened between the fabulously wealthy senatorial class, who amassed immense fortunes from conquest and exploitation, and the impoverished urban masses who struggled to survive in the crowded, often squalid conditions of the city. A system of government which had been ingeniously designed for a small, relatively homogeneous city-state began to buckle and groan under the immense strain of managing a vast, sprawling global empire. The institutions of the Republic, once robust and adaptable, were no longer fit for purpose. They were simply not equipped to handle the complexities and contradictions of an empire of such unprecedented scale. Politics, once a realm of debate and civic duty, devolved into a brutal blood sport, a ruthless struggle for power and influence. Ambitious men, driven by a desire to alleviate the growing social inequalities, like the idealistic brothers Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, attempted to enact much-needed land reforms to help the dispossessed poor. For their efforts, they were brutally assassinated by mobs of enraged senators and their clients, who saw their reforms as a threat to their own wealth and power. Their tragic deaths, far from quelling the unrest, opened the floodgates to a century of escalating political violence, a period marked by civil strife and bloodshed. Generals, who now commanded professional, long-serving armies composed of volunteers rather than citizen soldiers, discovered that their soldiers' loyalty was no longer to the distant, often corrupt Senate in Rome, but to them personally, the men who led them into battle, paid them, and most importantly, promised them land and a secure future upon retirement. A general's army thus became his private power base, a formidable instrument to further his own political ambitions, often at the expense of the state itself. The Republic, once a beacon of civic virtue, began to tear itself apart from within. A series of brutal civil wars erupted, pitting Roman against Roman, brother against brother, in a desperate struggle for supremacy. The general Marius, a new man who revolutionized the Roman army by opening the legions to the landless poor, clashed violently with his aristocratic rival Sulla, a staunch defender of senatorial privilege. Sulla, in an unprecedented act of treason, eventually marched his army on Rome itself, seizing power through force. After consolidating his control, he posted infamous lists of his political enemies in the Forum, offering rewards for their death. Thousands were murdered in these proscriptions, a chilling testament to the breakdown of law and order. The old rules, the unwritten conventions that had governed Roman politics for centuries, were breaking down, replaced by a brutal struggle for survival where might made right. As you listen to the echoes of this tumultuous period, let the chaos and conflict of the past recede, allowing your own mind to find a deep and abiding peace, a quiet stillness that transcends the ages. Caesar, the die is cast. This escalating cycle of violence and political instability culminated in the rise of two towering figures, men whose ambitions and actions would forever alter the course of Roman history. On one side stood Pompey the Great, a brilliant general who had achieved immense fame and power by consolidating Roman influence in the East, bringing vast new territories and wealth under Rome's dominion. On the other, a man whose name would become synonymous with power, ambition, and a profound shift in the very nature of Roman governance, Gaius Julius Caesar. Caesar was a man of extraordinary complexity and multifaceted brilliance. He was, at once, a populist aristocrat, keenly aware of the needs and desires of the common people, yet born into one of Rome's most ancient and noble families. He was a charismatic politician, possessing an uncanny ability to sway crowds and win loyalties. He was a writer of spare, elegant prose, his commentaries on his military campaigns still studied today for their clarity and precision. And arguably, he was the greatest general Rome ever produced, a military genius whose strategic insights and tactical prowess were unparalleled. His most famous achievement was the conquest of Gaul, modern-day France, a vast and rich territory that he added to Rome's burgeoning empire. This conquest not only brought immense wealth and prestige, but also cemented his heroic status among his soldiers who adored him and the common people of Rome, who saw him as their champion. But his meteoric success, his immense popularity, and his boundless ambition terrified the conservative senators, the old guard who clung desperately to the traditions and institutions of the Republic. They saw in him not a savior, but the chilling specter of a king, a return to the tyranny they had overthrown centuries ago. In their desperation, they allied with his rival Pompey and issued a fateful order. Caesar was to disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen, stripped of his military command and his political immunity. Caesar, a shrewd and calculating man, knew that to obey this order would mean not only political ruin, but almost certain death at the hands of his enemies. And so, on a fateful day in 49 BCE, he stood before a small, unassuming river in northern Italy, a river known as the Rubicon. This river marked the sacred boundary of his province, beyond which a general was forbidden to lead his army. To cross it with his legions was an act of treason, an open declaration of war against the state, an irreversible challenge to the authority of the Senate. The phrase "crossing the Rubicon" has ever since meant passing a point of no return, committing irrevocably to a course of action. Caesar hesitated, standing on the brink of a decision that would change the world. Then, with a profound sense of destiny, he made his choice. Alea iacta est, he famously declared. The die is cast. And with those words, he led his hardened, loyal legion across the river, plunging Rome into yet another devastating civil war. The civil war that followed was swift and brutal, but ultimately decisive. Caesar's veteran legions, forged in the crucible of the Gallic Wars and fiercely loyal to their commander, systematically crushed the armies of Pompey and the Senate. He pursued his enemies relentlessly, even chasing Pompey to Egypt, where he famously involved himself in a local civil war, securing the throne for the young and ambitious Queen Cleopatra, with whom he would form a legendary alliance. He returned to Rome not as a conqueror in the traditional sense, but as its undisputed master, the most powerful man in the Roman world. He was made dictator, first for 10 years, and then, in an unprecedented move, for life. With absolute power consolidated in his hands, he launched a massive program of reforms and public works, aiming to rebuild and revitalize a republic shattered by decades of civil strife. He reformed the calendar, creating the Julian calendar that, with only minor adjustments, we still use today, a testament to his foresight and administrative genius. He began to reshape the city of Rome in his own image, planning a new, grander forum and a great public library, envisioning a city worthy of its empire. He was, in essence, all-powerful. He was everything the Republic had been created to prevent. A single individual holding absolute sway over the destiny of Rome. And so, on the Ides of March, the 15th of the month, in the year 44 BCE, a group of about 60 senators, calling themselves the Liberators, cornered him in a portico next to the theater of Pompey. These men, many of whom had been pardoned by Caesar, saw themselves not as assassins, but as patriots, as the true successors to the first Brutus who had overthrown the kings centuries earlier. They believed they were saving the Republic from a tyrant. Led by Marcus Junius Brutus, a man whom Caesar had favored, and Gaius Cassius Longinus, they surrounded him and, in a desperate act of political violence, stabbed him 23 times. He died at the foot of a statue of his great rival Pompey, his blood pooling on the marble floor, a dramatic and tragic end to an extraordinary life. The assassination, however, did not restore the Republic as the conspirators had hoped. Instead, it plunged Rome into yet another, even more devastating round of civil wars, paving the way for the very thing they had sought to prevent, the rise of an emperor. As you absorb the weight of this pivotal moment, let the echoes of ambition and betrayal fade, allowing your mind to settle into a profound and undisturbed quiet, preparing for the deep sleep that awaits. The birth of empire, Augustus, and the eternal peace. The assassination of Caesar, far from restoring the Republic as the conspirators had so desperately hoped, plunged Rome into yet another devastating round of civil wars, even more brutal and destructive than those that had come before. The conspirators, despite their noble intentions, had fatally miscalculated. They had removed the man, but they had not addressed the underlying problems that had made his rise possible. The Republic was dying, its institutions crumbling under the weight of empire, its people yearning for stability and order. Into this chaos stepped three men, each with their own ambitions and vision for Rome's future: Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal lieutenant and a charismatic general in his own right; Lepidus, a competent but ultimately lesser figure; and most significantly, a young man who would prove to be one of history's most astute political minds, Caesar's adopted son and heir Octavian. Octavian was only 18 years old when Caesar was murdered, a seemingly insignificant youth in a world dominated by seasoned generals and powerful senators. But he possessed something that his rivals lacked: a keen understanding of the Roman people and their deepest desires. He also had the immense advantage of Caesar's name, which he wielded with remarkable skill. The three men formed an uneasy alliance, known as the Second Triumvirate, and systematically hunted down and eliminated Caesar's assassins. Brutus and Cassius, the leaders of the conspiracy, met their end at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE. Their republican dreams dying with them on the battlefield. But the alliance between the three triumvirs was always fragile, built on mutual necessity rather than genuine trust or shared vision. Inevitably, the triumvirate collapsed, and the final struggle for supremacy came down to a confrontation between Octavian and Mark Antony. Antony, who had allied himself with Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, represented the exotic, Hellenistic East, a world of luxury and ancient traditions. Octavian, by contrast, positioned himself as the defender of traditional Roman values, the champion of the West. The decisive battle came at Actium in 31 BCE, a naval engagement off the coast of Greece. Octavian's forces, led by his brilliant Admiral Agrippa, decisively defeated the combined fleets of Antony and Cleopatra. The lovers fled to Egypt, where, facing inevitable capture and humiliation, they chose to end their own lives. Antony fell on his sword, and Cleopatra, according to legend, allowed herself to be bitten by a venomous asp, dying as dramatically as she had lived. With their deaths, the last remnants of the Republic died as well. Octavian returned to Rome as its undisputed master, the sole ruler of the Roman world. But he was far too clever to repeat Caesar's mistakes. He understood that the Romans, despite their desire for order, still cherished the memory of the Republic and harbored a deep-seated fear of kings. And so, in a masterful display of political theater, he appeared before the Senate in 27 BCE and offered to restore the Republic, to relinquish his extraordinary powers and return to the status of a private citizen. The Senate, of course, refused, begging him to continue leading the state. In return for his sacrifice, they granted him a new title, one that would echo through the ages: Augustus, meaning the revered one. He had become, in all but name, the first Roman emperor, but he had done so while maintaining the fiction that the Republic still existed. Augustus ruled for over 40 years, from 27 BCE to 14 CE, a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana. The Roman peace. He reformed the administration of the empire, creating a professional civil service and establishing clear lines of authority. He rebuilt Rome itself, famously boasting that he had founded a city of brick and left it a city of marble. He commissioned magnificent public works, including the Forum of Augustus, the Theater of Marcellus, and the Mausoleum of Augustus, transforming the city into a fitting capital for a global empire. He also established the Praetorian Guard, an elite unit tasked with protecting the emperor, and reorganized the legions, creating a professional standing army that would serve as the backbone of Roman power for centuries to come. But perhaps Augustus's greatest achievement was the establishment of a new form of government, the Principate, which combined the efficiency of autocracy with the comforting illusion of republican tradition. He was not a king, but the first citizen, the princeps. He did not rule by divine right, but by the consent of the Senate and the people. This carefully crafted system would endure for centuries, providing the stability and continuity that the late Republic had so desperately lacked. Under Augustus and his successors, Rome would reach the height of its power and influence, its borders stretching from Britain in the north to Egypt in the south, from Spain in the west to the Euphrates in the east. The Mediterranean had truly become a Roman lake, and the city on the Tiber stood at the center of the known world. As you listen to the story of Augustus and the birth of the empire, allow yourself to feel the sense of peace and order that he brought to the Roman world. Let the chaos and violence of the civil wars fade away, replaced by the calm and stability of the Pax Romana. Feel your own breathing slow and deepen, mirroring the tranquil rhythm of an empire at peace. The struggles and conflicts of the day are behind you now, just as they were behind the Romans who lived under Augustus's wise and benevolent rule. Let this sense of profound peace wash over you, carrying you gently towards the restorative sleep that awaits. The Golden Age, art, architecture, and the soul of empire, under the wise and steady rule of Augustus and his successors, Rome entered what historians would later call its Golden Age. A period of unprecedented cultural flowering and artistic achievement. This was the era when Rome truly became the Caput Mundi, the capital of the world, not merely through military conquest, but through the sheer magnificence of its civilization. The city itself became a living testament to Roman power and ingenuity. A marble symphony of temples, theaters, baths, and forums that dazzled visitors from every corner of the empire. The Colosseum, that iconic symbol of Roman engineering prowess, rose majestically from the heart of the city during the reign of the Flavian emperors. This massive amphitheater, capable of holding over 50,000 spectators, was a marvel of ancient technology. Its complex system of underground chambers, elevators, and trapdoors allowed for elaborate spectacles that seemed to defy the laws of nature. Wild animals would appear as if by magic from beneath the arena floor, and the entire structure could be flooded for mock naval battles, transforming the space into a miniature sea. But beyond its technical achievements, the Colosseum represented something deeper about Roman society Their love of spectacle, their appreciation for both beauty and brutality, and their ability to create spaces that brought together people from all walks of life in shared experience. The Pantheon, that architectural masterpiece that still stands today, embodied the Roman genius for combining Greek aesthetic principles with revolutionary engineering techniques. Its massive concrete dome, still the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world, seems to float effortlessly above the circular chamber below. The oculus at its center, open to the sky, creates a constantly changing play of light and shadow throughout the day, connecting the earthly realm with the heavens above. When you stand within its sacred space, you can almost feel the presence of the gods for whom it was built, and understand why it has inspired architects and artists for nearly 2,000 years. The Roman Forum, the beating heart of the empire, was transformed during this period into a magnificent complex of temples, basilicas, and monuments. Here, beneath the shadow of the Palatine Hill, where Romulus and Remus had been nurtured by the she-wolf, senators debated the fate of nations, merchants conducted business that spanned continents, and ordinary citizens gathered to hear the latest news from the far reaches of the empire. The Forum was more than just a political and commercial center. It was the soul of Rome, the place where the diverse peoples of the empire came together to participate in the grand experiment of Roman civilization. This was also the age of Rome's greatest poets and writers, men whose words would echo through the centuries and shape the literary traditions of the Western world. Virgil, the gentle poet from the countryside near Mantua, crafted the Aeneid, an epic that told the story of Rome's mythical origins while celebrating the destiny of the empire. His hero, Aeneas, embodied the Roman virtues of duty, piety, and sacrifice, showing how individual desires must sometimes be subordinated to the greater good of the state. Ovid, with his playful wit and sophisticated urbanity, wrote the Metamorphoses, a collection of myths that explored the themes of transformation and change that were so central to Roman experience. Horace, the master of lyric poetry, captured the pleasures and anxieties of urban life, while also reflecting on the deeper questions of mortality and meaning that have always haunted human consciousness. The visual arts flourished as well during this golden period. Roman sculptors, building on Greek traditions, but adding their own distinctive touches, created portraits of unprecedented realism and psychological depth. The statue of Augustus from Prima Porta, with its idealized features and symbolic imagery, perfectly captured the emperor's vision of himself as both a mortal ruler and a divine figure. Roman painters, working in the villas of Pompeii and Herculaneum, developed sophisticated techniques for creating the illusion of depth and space, decorating walls with elaborate architectural fantasies and mythological scenes that transported viewers to other worlds. But perhaps the most remarkable achievement of this golden age was the development of Roman law, a system of jurisprudence that would become the foundation of legal systems throughout the Western world. Roman jurists, working over centuries, developed principles of justice and legal procedure that emphasized fairness, consistency, and the protection of individual rights. The concept that all citizens were equal before the law regardless of their social status or wealth, was a revolutionary idea that would eventually transform societies far beyond the borders of the Roman Empire. The Romans also excelled in the practical arts that made their vast empire function smoothly. Their engineers built roads that connected the farthest provinces to the capital, creating a network of communication and trade that had never before existed. The famous saying, "all roads lead to Rome," was quite literally true, as these magnificent highways, built to last for centuries, facilitated the movement of armies, merchants, and ideas across vast distances. Roman aqueducts, marvels of hydraulic engineering, brought fresh water from mountain springs to cities hundreds of miles away, making possible the growth of urban centers that could support populations of unprecedented size. In the great public baths, such as the baths of Caracalla, Romans of all social classes could enjoy the luxury of hot and cold pools, steam rooms, libraries, and gardens. These were not merely places for bathing, but social centers where business was conducted, friendships were formed, and the diverse populations of the empire mingled together. The baths embodied the Roman ideal of civilization, the transformation of basic human needs into opportunities for beauty, pleasure, and social connection. As you contemplate this golden age of Roman achievement, allow yourself to be transported to those magnificent spaces. Imagine walking through the marble halls of the Pantheon, feeling the cool stone beneath your feet and the play of light from the oculus above. Picture yourself in the gardens of a Roman villa, surrounded by the gentle sound of fountains and the fragrance of flowering plants. Let the grandeur and beauty of Roman civilization fill your mind, creating a sense of awe and wonder that gradually transforms into deep relaxation. The Romans understood that true civilization was not just about power and conquest, but about creating spaces and experiences that elevated the human spirit. As you absorb this understanding, feel your own spirit being elevated and calmed, preparing for the peaceful rest that lies ahead. Emperors and empires. The shifting sands of power following the long and prosperous reign of Augustus, the Roman Empire continued its majestic, yet often turbulent journey through history. The system he had so carefully crafted, the Principe, provided a framework for stability, but the character of each emperor profoundly shaped the destiny of Rome. From the Julio-Claudians, who followed Augustus, to the five good emperors, and then into periods of increasing instability, the story of Rome became intertwined with the personalities and policies of its rulers. Each emperor, in their own way, added another layer to the rich tapestry of the eternal city, leaving their mark on its stones, its laws, and its very soul. Consider the early emperors, the Julio-Claudian dynasty, direct descendants or close relatives of Augustus. Tiberius, a reluctant ruler, navigated the complexities of imperial power with a cautious hand. Caligula, whose brief and erratic reign became a byword for imperial excess, reminded Romans of the dangers of unchecked authority. Claudius, a scholar and administrator, oversaw the conquest of Britain, extending Rome's reach to the very edge of the known world. And Nero, whose reign began with promise but descended into tyranny, left behind a legacy of artistic ambition and destructive paranoia, culminating in the Great Fire of Rome and the persecution of Christians. Each of these rulers, in their own way, contributed to the evolving understanding of what it meant to be an emperor and what it meant to be Rome. After the turmoil of the Year of the Four Emperors, a period of civil war that followed Nero's death, the Flavian dynasty emerged, bringing a renewed sense of order and purpose. Vespasian, a pragmatic and down-to-earth emperor, restored stability to the empire and initiated the construction of the Colosseum, a monument that would forever symbolize Roman grandeur. His son, Titus, though reigning for only a short time, was beloved for his benevolent rule and his efforts to aid the victims of the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, which tragically buried Pompeii and Herculaneum. Domitian, the last of the Flavians, ruled with a firm hand, consolidating imperial power, but ultimately falling victim to assassination, a grim reminder of the ever-present dangers of imperial politics. Then came the period often referred to as the Pax Romana at its height, the era of the five good emperors: Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. This was a golden age of stability, prosperity, and enlightened rule. These emperors, unlike many of their predecessors, often chose their successors based on merit rather than bloodline, ensuring a continuity of competent leadership. Trajan, a military genius, expanded the empire to its greatest territorial extent, conquering Dacia, modern-day Romania, and Mesopotamia, bringing vast new resources and peoples under Roman rule. His column in Rome, a towering monument adorned with intricate carvings, tells the story of his Dacian campaigns, a visual chronicle of Roman military might and engineering skill. Hadrian, a cultured and intellectual emperor, recognized the limits of imperial expansion and focused instead on consolidating and defending the empire's vast borders. He traveled extensively throughout the provinces, inspecting garrisons, building infrastructure, and fostering a sense of unity. His most famous legacy is Hadrian's Wall, a monumental defensive barrier stretching across northern Britain, a testament to Roman engineering and a symbol of the empire's determination to protect its frontiers. He also commissioned the rebuilding of the Pantheon, transforming it into the architectural marvel we see today, and built his magnificent villa at Tivoli, a sprawling complex of gardens, temples, and palaces that reflected his eclectic tastes and his deep appreciation for art and philosophy. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, ruled during a period of increasing external pressures, including barbarian incursions and a devastating plague. Despite these challenges, he remained committed to his Stoic principles, finding solace and guidance in self-discipline, reason, and duty. His Meditations, a collection of personal reflections, offers a profound insight into the mind of a ruler grappling with the burdens of power and the inevitability of human suffering. His reign, though marked by conflict, is often seen as the pinnacle of the Roman Empire's moral and intellectual strength. Yet, even during this golden age, the seeds of future challenges were being sown. The sheer size of the empire, while a source of immense power, also presented formidable administrative and logistical challenges. Maintaining control over such vast territories with diverse cultures and languages required constant vigilance and immense resources. The reliance on slave labor, while economically beneficial in the short term, stifled innovation and created deep social divisions. The constant need for military expansion, while bringing wealth and glory, also stretched the empire's resources and manpower to their limits, creating a perpetual demand for soldiers and a drain on the treasury. The Roman army, once a force of citizen soldiers, evolved into a professional fighting machine, its loyalty increasingly tied to its generals rather than to the distant Senate or emperor. This shift, while making the army more effective in battle, also made it a powerful political player capable of making and unmaking emperors. The vast wealth flowing into Rome, while creating unparalleled luxury for the elite, also led to rampant corruption and a growing disconnect between the ruling class and the common people. The very success of the empire, in a strange twist of fate, began to contribute to its long-term vulnerabilities. As you listen to the stories of these emperors, of their triumphs and their struggles, allow your mind to drift through the centuries, observing the ebb and flow of power, the rise and fall of dynasties. Feel the weight of history, but let it be a comforting weight, a reminder of the enduring nature of human endeavor. Let the images of grand monuments and vast empires gently guide you into a state of deep tranquility, where the concerns of your own day fade into the distant past, leaving only the quiet rhythm of your breath and the profound peace of approaching sleep. The long decline, cracks in the edifice, even at the zenith of its power, the Roman Empire, like all great civilizations, carried within it the seeds of its own eventual transformation. The Pax Romana, while a period of unparalleled peace and prosperity, could not last forever. By the 3rd century CE, the cracks in the magnificent edifice of the empire began to show, slowly at first and with increasing frequency and severity. This was not a sudden collapse, but a long, drawn-out process. A gradual unraveling influenced by a complex interplay of internal weaknesses and external pressures. As you listen, imagine a grand, ancient building, slowly succumbing to the relentless forces of time and neglect, its once sturdy foundations beginning to shift. One of the most significant internal challenges was the sheer size of the empire. Governing and defending such a vast territory, stretching from the cold mists of Britain to the scorching deserts of North Africa, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Euphrates River, became an increasingly impossible task. Communication was slow, administration cumbersome, and the resources required to maintain such an expansive dominion were immense. The empire became overstretched, its legions thinly spread across vast frontiers, constantly battling barbarian incursions from beyond its borders. Economic woes also began to plague the empire. Inflation soared as emperors debased the currency, reducing the silver content of coins to pay for their ever-increasing military expenses and lavish public works. This led to a loss of confidence in the currency, widespread economic instability, and a decline in trade. Agricultural production, the backbone of the Roman economy, suffered from overcultivation, climate change, and the constant threat of invasion, leading to food shortages and rising prices. The wealthy elite continued to prosper, but the vast majority of the population, particularly the urban poor and the small farmers, faced increasing hardship, leading to social unrest and a growing sense of disillusionment. Political instability became endemic. The 3rd century CE is famously known as the Crisis of the 3rd Century, a period of 50 years during which Rome saw no fewer than 26 legitimate emperors and countless usurpers, each vying for power. Most of these emperors met violent ends, assassinated by their own soldiers or rivals. This constant turnover of leadership led to a profound lack of continuity in policy, a weakening of central authority, and a pervasive sense of insecurity throughout the empire. The army, once the protector of Rome, became its master, its legions often more loyal to their generals than to the state, frequently proclaiming their own commanders as emperor, leading to endless civil wars that further drained the empire's resources and manpower. External pressures intensified dramatically. From the north and east, new and increasingly powerful barbarian tribes, the Goths, the Vandals, the Huns, the Franks, and others began to press against Rome's borders with unprecedented force. These were not merely disorganized bands of raiders. They were often well-organized, highly mobile groups, sometimes fleeing even more fearsome invaders from deeper in the Eurasian steppes. The Romans, once the conquerors, now found themselves constantly on the defensive, struggling to repel these incursions. The cost of maintaining a massive standing army to defend these vast frontiers became an unbearable burden on the imperial treasury. Religious changes also played a significant role. The rise of Christianity, initially a persecuted sect, gradually gained adherents throughout the empire. By the end of the 4th century, it had become the official state religion. While Christianity brought a new moral framework and a sense of universal community, its emphasis on a heavenly kingdom sometimes clashed with the traditional Roman civic virtues of loyalty to the state and the worship of the emperor. The shift from a polytheistic system, which was inherently inclusive and adaptable, to a monotheistic one, which was often exclusive, also contributed to social tensions and a reorientation of cultural values. In an attempt to manage the unwieldy empire, Emperor Diocletian, at the end of the 3rd century, implemented radical reforms. He divided the empire into East and West, each with its own emperor, Augustus, and junior emperor, Caesar, creating a system known as the Tetrarchy. While this initially brought some stability, it also formalized the growing divergence between the Greek-speaking East and the Latin-speaking West. The Eastern Roman Empire, with its richer provinces, more urbanized centers, and more defensible borders, would eventually evolve into the Byzantine Empire, a story for another time. The Western Roman Empire, however, with its less prosperous provinces and more exposed frontiers, continued its slow, agonizing decline. Constantine the Great, in the early 4th century, further solidified the division by establishing a new capital in the east, Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, strategically located at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. This new Rome, built on the site of the ancient Greek city of Byzantium, quickly grew in wealth and importance, further diminishing the prestige and resources of the old capital. While Rome remained a symbolic center, the true power and wealth of the empire increasingly resided in the east. The final blows to the Western Roman Empire came in the 5th century. Wave after wave of barbarian invasions swept across its territories. The Visigoths sacked Rome itself in 410 CE, an event that sent shockwaves throughout the known world. A psychological blow that shattered the illusion of Roman invincibility. The Vandals followed, sacking Rome again in 455 CE province after province fell away, either conquered by barbarian tribes or establishing their own independent kingdoms. Britain was abandoned, Gaul was overrun by Franks and Burgundians, Spain by Visigoths, and North Africa, the empire's breadbasket, fell to the Vandals. Finally, in 476 CE, the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustus, a mere boy, was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer. This date is traditionally given as the fall of the Western Roman Empire, but it was not a dramatic, cataclysmic event, but rather the culmination of centuries of gradual decline, a quiet fading away rather than a sudden collapse. The institutions of the empire had long since ceased to function effectively, and the deposition of a powerless boy emperor was merely a symbolic end to a process that had been underway for generations. The Roman way of life, however, did not simply vanish overnight. Elements of Roman law, language, and culture persisted, blending with the traditions of the new Germanic kingdoms that emerged from the ashes of the empire. As you reflect on this long decline, on the slow, inevitable transformation of a once mighty empire, allow yourself to release any burdens you may be carrying. Just as the ancient stones of Rome eventually yielded to the forces of time, so too can your worries and tensions dissolve into the quietude of the night. Feel the weight lifting from your shoulders, your mind becoming lighter, clearer, as you drift deeper into a peaceful, undisturbed sleep. The past is a story, and now it is time for your own story to find its restful conclusion in dreams. The enduring legacy, Rome in our dreams, and so our journey through the eternal city, Rome, draws to a close. We have traversed millennia from the mythical origins of Romulus and Remus, nurtured by the she-wolf on the Palatine Hill, through the pragmatic rise of the Republic, forged in conflict and civic virtue. We have witnessed the titanic struggles of the Punic Wars, the brilliance and tragedy of Julius Caesar, and the masterful establishment of the empire under Augustus, ushering in the Pax Romana, a period of unparalleled peace and prosperity. We have marveled at the architectural wonders of the Colosseum and the Pantheon, absorbed the wisdom of its philosophers, and understood the enduring power of its laws. And finally, we have observed the long, slow transformation of the Western Empire, not a sudden fall, but a gradual evolution, leaving behind a legacy that continues to shape our world. Rome, the city of savage contradictions, of sacred beauty and brutal politics, of sublime art and relentless ambition, lives on not just in its ruins, but in the very fabric of our modern lives. Its language, Latin, forms the root of countless words we speak today, influencing the Romance languages and enriching English. Its legal principles, emphasizing justice, fairness, and the rule of law, underpin legal systems across the globe. Its architectural innovations, from the arch and the dome to concrete, continue to inspire engineers and builders. Its political concepts, such as the Republic, the Senate, and the idea of citizenship, remain cornerstones of democratic thought. Even the very idea of a vast interconnected empire, for better or worse, owes much to the Roman model. But beyond these tangible legacies, Rome lives on in our collective imagination and the stories we tell, the myths we perpetuate, and the lessons we draw from its rise and transformation. It reminds us of the cyclical nature of history, of the enduring human capacity for both greatness and folly, for creation and destruction. It teaches us about resilience in the face of adversity, the importance of civic duty, and the dangers of unchecked power. It whispers to us of the beauty of art, the power of engineering, and the profound human need for order and meaning. As you lie here, enveloped in the quiet darkness, let the echoes of Rome's long and magnificent story gently settle within you. Imagine the ancient stones, now silent, holding within them the memories of emperors and slaves, poets and soldiers, saints and sinners. Feel the weight of history not as a burden, but as a comforting presence, a reminder that you are part of a continuous human narrative stretching back through time. The struggles of the past, the triumphs, and the tragedies have all contributed to the world you inhabit and to the quiet peace you now seek. Allow your breath to deepen, becoming slow and rhythmic, like the gentle flow of the Tiber River, carrying away any remaining thoughts or tensions. Feel your body becoming heavier, sinking deeper into the comfort of your bed, as if you're becoming one with the ancient earth itself. Let the images of Rome, its grandeur, and its quiet dignity fade into the soft mists of sleep. You have journeyed far, and now it is time for true rest. May your dreams be filled with the peaceful echoes of history, with the quiet strength of ancient stones, and with the profound tranquility that comes from knowing you are safe, secure, and deeply at peace. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Sweet dreams. And remember to subscribe to Sleeping Therapy by Emma for more calming narratives and guided sleep experiences. Until next time, rest well.